my name is Serena. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, even if you put a heart emoji in the comments so we can get this YouTube algorithm going, because you know they don't be liking black people and putting them on their page as much, so help me out. But anyways, today we're facing my window because the lighting is coming. It's really gray outside. I'm trying to get as much natural light as possible, and the other way was looking kind of ghetto, but I still have my plants. They've grown so much, like, oh my god, this plant grew a lot too. I had roses before, but they like died. I cannot believe it's December. Like, it's December of 2020. It's been such a long year. Like, December of 2020, that's so crazy to me. But today I'm talking about introversion and alone time, actually, which perfect weather that we have here going on. This is like perfect introvert weather. But of course, we've all, like, I feel like 2020 was definitely the year of being alone because of the pandemic, whether we wanted to be alone or not. Like, a lot of us spent a lot of time alone, even if we didn't want to necessarily. But for those who don't know, I'm an extrovert. All my friends know this. And what an extrovert is, for those who might not know what that means, an extrovert is essentially someone who gets energy from hanging out with other people or from going out. Like, they are energized by that. So like, if I go to a party and there's a lot of stimulus, that stimulus is exciting for me, and like, I want more of that. Whereas an introvert is someone who gets energy from being alone. So if they're at a party, all that stimulus at once, like, their social battery kind of goes down, whereas like, I'm charged by all that stimulus, so they need more time alone to just process in general. That's not to say that I feel like there's this like narrative that extroverts are like crazy and don't know how to like be alone and process their feelings, which is really ironic because I love processing my feelings. I love writing in my diary. I love thinking, like, I'm always thinking, yet I'm still extroverted. So I just think that's an interesting narrative. Like, oftentimes I'll like go online and look at like introvert stuff, and they'll be like, introverts spend a lot of time alone and they process their feelings, and I'm like, I process my feelings 25/8 and I'm still extroverted. So I just thought that was so funny. Granted, it's easier to do that when you're alone, and I still take that time to do that, but I just thought it was funny that like they kind of like designate that to introverts solely, which is very funny. But the reason why I'm talking about extroversion and introversion is I kind of want to discuss like alone time and what alone time kind of means, both in terms of, to me, my like journey with alone time versus like society's ideas of alone time and how that applies to like someone who could be extroverted, which is me. So I feel like it's so interesting. I feel like this like idea, or I've been thinking about this a lot recently, because I realized that I had been lying to myself. Basically, it started, I was walking around outside near the Mall of Georgia because I was getting my MacBook fixed, and I was walking around, and it was very rare. I didn't have music playing. Usually when I'm walking, I always have music playing, but for whatever reason, like, my headphones were on my neck, and I was just like walking around near Cheesecake Factory because I was getting some for like Thanksgiving, and I just started thinking, and I was just thinking, you know, when you just think and walk around. So I was thinking, and then I started thinking about how when I was a kid in Colorado, I would like, basically we had like this really nice backyard, and near the backyard there's like a little canal or stream thing, and I would always like run around in the grass over there, and then I would run to the other end. Like, I would walk along, and there was like all these houses in the back, like these are all the backs of the houses, and I would walk and walk and walk, and there would be like this wooden plank, and I would move the plank to the side and go through, and then there was a park. So it was kind of like, I kind of felt like it was my own little expedition, like, oh my god, this is park. And I would go to the park whether there was kids there or not, and I always had my own world. Like, I was always like dreaming, fantasizing, thinking. Like, I've always been an imaginary in that way. Like, I was that kid who had imaginary like dream worlds in the playground. Like, I never really had imaginary friends, but I had imaginary scenarios. So I would like designate the playground into different categories. Like, I remember I was obsessed with Monster High, so what I did was I would like designate each part of the playground into like one of the themes from Monster High. So like, oh, this is the water world, this is the tundra, etc. So as I was walking, I was thinking about how I did that as a kid, and it kind of like struck me. I was like, I've been lying to myself and telling myself, oh, I'm bad at alone time. Oh, I don't like being alone, blah, blah, blah. When really, I've had so many positive memories of me being alone. Like, I know the kid example is very far away, but I started thinking more. I was like, no, I've had positive moments. Like, there's been so many times where I decided to go into Manhattan alone and just like walk around and see things. And like, I remember there's a picture that I took on my Instagram. It's like really old. I took of like, you know how they put a Christmas tree up near Rockefeller Center? Like, I remember I walked there and I was just sitting down and like admiring the tree. It's kind of like November, and just like admiring the fact that I had walked around all day. Like, I walk around a lot because of my mom. Like, I love walking, so I'll walk from like, usually I do with my cousin, I'll walk from like Harlem to like Fulton, like just walking for 3 hours and talking, and by the time I get there it feels like 10 minutes. But I just started remembering, like, I've done those things alone. Like, I solely went on the train on my own on the weekend and walked around just because I wanted to, and like found all these things, or found a Christmas event, or like, you know, like the little Christmas store things that they have at Bryant Park. Like, I did that, and I was just kind of like in shock. Like, I was so shocked I kind of had to just stop walking and just like think, and I kind of felt sad. I was like, this whole time I built this narrative that I suck at alone time, when really I have so many memories of me being alone and just thinking, and those were positive things. And I started kind of asking myself, like, why did I think that I was so bad at alone time, or why did I think that I hated it? And what I realized was, sophomore year of high school, I was really depressed. And obviously when you're depressed, you kind of want to be alone because like you're depressed. So I kind of, like, my memory or the narrative that my brain created was, oh, when you're alone, it reminds Serena of these times where you were depressed and you were alone. Because I spent a lot of time alone when I was depressed, just like being depressed. And I guess my brain was like, it kind of just made this association of depression and being alone. And then also there were times where I was a kid where people didn't want to hang out with me, so I was forced to be alone. And even though I was forced to be alone, I still had fun. Like, I remember, again, more memories of like when I was living in Berlin, I would go to the library and I would just read for hours, like during lunchtime, just alone. And even though I enjoyed doing that, there were still lots of times where I wanted to be social, because all people are social at some point. But I wanted to be social and there was no one there for me to be social with. So I think like after that depressive episode sophomore year, like moving forwards, I just, every time I thought about alone time, I thought about the negative moments. So I just assumed that like people who enjoyed being alone liked being alone, and like I didn't understand that because I had associated all these memories of negativity when it comes to alone time, because I did have memories of where I was forced to be alone, I was forced to be quote lonely, or I was forced into this sense of like isolation that I did not choose. And if you're forced to be alone, it does not feel like good. Like, I remember I was reading this article, I don't remember where it was, I think it was actually the New York Times, and it was like the study of being alone, and they were talking about, it was during like the pandemic, when the pandemic first started. They interviewed like different introverts or different people who spend time alone, and they actually interviewed someone who was in solitary confinement. Obviously you do not want to be in solitary confinement, that's not something you choose, that's something that's forced upon you. But one of the people who had been there for like months, I think like 7 months, he was talking about how when you are forced to be alone, or you are forced into this place of loneliness that you do not choose, you really have to change your perspective on how you view that alone time to essentially prevent yourself from being crazy. So what he did is he kind of took it as a discipline of being alone, and kind of chose it. Even though he was forced into that position, he like was able to choose that discipline and work with it, and he was like able to meditate and read and produce lots of creative acts. Of course, I'm not a proponent for solitary confinement, I'm obviously not a proponent for prison, but it's interesting like what we can do when we change our intentions when it comes to something as interesting as aloneness. Like, a lot of people actively choose to be alone, and I feel like that ability to choose, I want to be alone in this moment, plays a big role in how we view alone time. But when I realized that, I went home and I was like, wow, like this whole time I've been lying, talking about, oh, I hate being alone, I just don't like it. And I'm like, that's not true. I have look at all these memories and fun times. I think the only thing that was maybe missing for me is the stimulus. Like, I guess in New York it's more fun to be alone because I can just walk around and see thousands of things, whereas now I'm like in a suburban area. There's not a lot around me. Like, look, this is the booties. So I kind of have to like reorient my intention in the ways in which I practice being alone, because I feel like a lot of introverts, when they're alone, they tend to do things in their house, like read and stuff like that. I love reading. I've always been a voracious reader, but I guess just my setting is important to me. Like, I just personally do not like being in the house all day every day. I like to go outside and like kind of be stimulated by all these things. So I think that's why like I made this attachment in my mind of like, oh, I'm home, I don't like this, when really I've had so many memories of me being alone and doing something or reading or whatever, and they were positive and transformative and inspired me to like create, etc., etc. But another reason why I realized I kind of needed to spend more time alone is because of another realization that I had that kind of like, it really shook me actually. Because so most of my friends, the majority of my friends are introverts. Like, I think 98% of my friends are introverts, which is ironic because I feel like extroverts always attract introverts and introverts always attract extroverts. It's like just always been like that. And not only are the majority of them introverted, the majority of them are low maintenance friends. So what I mean by low maintenance friends, these are people that don't really need to be checked on every day or every week or even every month to feel secure or happy or okay in the relationship. So again, like, I think 98% of my friends are like that. And for me, I don't like the term high maintenance because it makes it seem like I need it, but that's not necessarily how I feel. I guess I would be considered a high maintenance friend, but for me, what that means is more like I just enjoy speaking to my friends frequently. I don't need it. Like, I'm not like, oh my God, if I don't speak to my friend, I'm gonna die. Like, that's not what it is. But I like kind of what I was saying before about extroverts. They get energy from hanging out with people or from that stimulus. So that stimulus brings me joy. So I am joyous when I am engaging with my friends, when I am asking them how they are. Whereas a lot of my friends, because as I said before, introverts or low maintenance friendships, they don't necessarily get joy from that and might be seen as a nuisance or just unnecessary. By the way, my sun in Pisces is in my 11th house, so I'm very much devoted to my friends. I treat my friendships like they're relationships, and what I mean by that is I'm devoted to my friendships. Like, I'm very invested in them. I think about them. I think about ways in which we can self-develop together. I feel like a lot of times when people think about self-development, they only think about themselves. But when I think of my friendships, I think of how can we self-develop with each other. Of course, I do my own self-development on my own, but I also apply that to my friendships. I feel like a lot of people only do that with romantic relationships, or they're only devoted to their romantic relationships. But I view friendships as very important. Like, if you're my friend, you're my family. Like, if you're my close friend, I consider you a part of my family, which is why I'm so devoted to them. And I think what I would define as being devoted to my friend would look like, if I have an issue with them, I would want to sit down and discuss that issue and figure out how we can grow as friends. Or if there's a concern with them, I would want to sit down and talk to them about it and be there for them. Like, I'm very attentive to my friends in that way. And a lot of my friends just do not need that. So when I was growing up, I thought anyone would want a friend like me. Like, I thought, oh, anyone would want a friend who's devoted to their friends and attentive and pays attention and is always there. Or, oh, I would think anyone would want the attention that I give my friends because that's what I want. So of course, I feel like oftentimes we do this where we think what we want is what other people want, which is not necessarily the case. So I just thought, oh, anyone would want a friend who is consistent. Anyone would want that. Like, anyone would value consistency. And then I realized what was happening was I was getting mad at my friends because they weren't like as devoted as I was. So I was getting mad at my friends, and then as time went on, I realized like, I'm essentially mad at myself. And what I mean by that is I assumed that anyone or that everyone is as devoted to their friends or needs that type of consistency with their friends, when in reality it's more me. So when I realized that, it's kind of like the anger disappeared and I was kind of just shook. I was like, oh, I just made expectations that no one asked for. And I kind of made an analogy. I said it's kind of like I've been building invisible closets for all my friends, and then they like come into the house and they're like, what are you doing in my house? And I'm like, oh my god, look at this closet I built for you, like, isn't it pretty? And they're like, what are you talking about? Because it's invisible. And then two, they never asked for it. So I'm spending all this time like trying to build this closet, putting my blood, sweat, and tears into this closet, and then they're like, first of all, I can't see it because they just can't see the hard work and labor that I put into it, because they don't need that in their life. And then on top of that, they did not ask for it. So then I would get mad, like, you can't see my closet, you can't see the hard work, the hours, the years, the months I put into this closet, like, you can't see it. And they're like, bitch, I never asked for that. I never asked for that closet. What are you doing? Like, can you please leave my house? So it's kind of like, when I realized, I was like, wow, like, it's me. I just assumed that other people would want that, and that's not the case. And again, just to clarify, like, when I mean consistency, I don't mean you need to speak to me every single day. Like, I have one of my friends, Tashad, I mentioned her in my other video with hair. I speak to her once a month. Like, literally, if you look at our call logs, we speak once a month, and I'm fine with that. I don't have any, like, I'm not like, oh my god, I need your attention. Like, I'm not like that with her. I feel like when I mean consistency, I don't mean consistency like every day written down, planned. I mean consistency in terms of like emotional availability. And I feel like everyone's capacity to be emotionally unavailable and the ways in which that they show that is very different. So I always say that there are three kinds of people. People who are good at text, people who are good at phone call, people who are good at hanging out. So you can be one of those three, or you can be like two, or you can be all three of them, or some people are just bad at all of them. And I think for me, like, just the way that I am, I would appreciate if all my friends had at least one thing that they were good at, because if not, I'm like, what's the point of me being in this friendship? Because I'm never gonna know when you're gonna be there, ever. And like, for me, that personally, I just don't like that, because as I said before, like, I see my friends as my family. So if I feel like I never know where you are or when you're gonna come in or not come in, I'm like, how can I like interact with you? But that's what I mean by consistency. I don't mean consistency in terms of every day of the week, etc. But anyways, when I realized that, I realized I have to reinvest in myself. I have to put that devotion that I expected my friends to give to me, because that's what I want, back into myself. I kind of made another analogy of kind of like I've been overwatering these plants when I'm the one who needs water. So I kind of like shifted that and started watering myself. So in terms of recultivating my relationship with alone time, what I've started doing is, when I decide to spend alone time, and I try to do it every day, I mean, I'm in the house every day anyways, alone or with my aunt. So what I do is, when I decide to take that alone time, I make sure that my phone's on do not disturb. I try and like not go on my phone unless I'm like playing music or something. And when I'm taking that alone time, I let myself know like, oh, you're taking this alone time. That way, when I'm taking the alone time, I can remember that I've done it. Because I think in the past, what I would do is, I would get mad that I'm not getting consistency from my friends, because before I didn't realize that not everyone needs that. So I was mad, and then I would be alone as a reaction. I feel like that's very common in depression too, where you decide to be alone as a reaction of your condition. But what I would do is I would be alone because I'm upset. So I'm like, oh, you guys don't want to be consistent with me? Then I'll just be alone. And that never worked because I was doing it as a reaction. The intention is very different. If you're being alone as a result of reaction, your intention is, oh, I want these people to reach out to me. That intention is not good, because you're putting your intention in what someone else will do, which means that other person or those people have power over your emotions or how you feel. Like, that's the basis of what a reaction means, in my point of view. But what I realize now is, now that I'm taking alone time intentionally, my intention is, my intention is not, if I take this alone time, they'll reach out to me. That's not what my intention is now. My intention is, I want to plant seeds in myself. I want to be devoted to myself the ways in which I'm devoted to my friends. So So let me take this alone time to show myself, to show my brain that, oh, I'm spending time with me and I'm nourishing myself. So the intention is very different now. So now when I'm like alone, I'm not mad if my friends aren't reaching out to me, because I'm not being alone so that they reach out to me. I'm being alone because I want to be alone. And I feel like that has like really reshaped the way in which I view alone time. It's reshaped the way in which I see introverts, and it's reshaped the way in how I see my friends who don't need that consistency. It's just a fact, like not everybody needs that, and that's not a bad thing or a good thing, and I'm not better or worse for wanting that emotional consistency, whatever way that means to me. As I explained before, it just means that we're different, and I feel like a burden was lifted from my chest. At first, when I realized that, I'm not gonna lie, it felt like some part of me died. Like the last like optimistic, happy-go-lucky, really wants friends when I was a kid part of me died. But as I've like been practicing this, like this discipline of like to be alone, I realized that it's like taking a chip off my shoulder, it's taking a burden off my shoulder. Because now when I'm spending time alone, I'm not over here thinking, oh my god, when are my friends gonna reach out to me? Like, oh my god, they don't even notice I'm gone. Like, I'm not doing that anymore. Now I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go play my video games for an hour or 2 hours because I want to, and I want to spend time with myself, and that's why I'm not gonna pick up the phone. Or maybe I'll play video games and I do want to be social, so I will pick up the phone. Like, now it's more about what I'm doing rather than let me go self-isolate so that people notice I'm gone. That's not healthy because I'm still putting my intention in other people. And I feel like it's helped me a lot, like just be more empathetic with people who like to spend time alone. Because before I used to be angry. I'd be like, you, like I think like a couple years ago, like I literally used to, I used to like hate introverts, even though most of my friends are introverts. Like I used to hate like the fact that they were introverted because I was jealous. In my mind, I was like, oh, they get to be alone and they don't need anyone and blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, it's now I know it's not that they don't need anyone, or it's not that I don't know how to be alone. It's just that like measurement of consistency, emotional consistency is different. Like that setting is different. Same thing with the introversion thing. That like energy bar is just built differently. And that's okay. I feel like that's okay. Like I feel like our society is always like, oh, we value introverts more because they don't need nobody and that's how we should be. Or people are like, we value extroverts more because they're sociable and introverts aren't. And I'm like, that's not constructive for anyone. We should, instead of doing that, we should kind of like look at how people operate and work from there. I feel like that's way more constructive and way more important than being like, oh, society values these people more, because then you start beating yourself up for not being like that other thing. And I know that there's lots of introverts who are like, oh, I wish I was more extroverted because then I could like make small talk with my boss and get a raise. I'm just giving a random example because I feel like society does this thing where like this thing is better, but also this thing, which is the exact opposite of this thing that I just mentioned, is better. Like they do that a lot with beauty standards, any standards. So I feel like that's why it's so important to just do you, to just vibe, understand your condition, understand who you are as a human, and then value other people for what they do and respect that as well, rather than being like, I wish I was this, because that's not who you are. But yeah, I feel like when it comes to, in terms of compromise, in terms of like extroverts and introverts, or people who need more emotional consistency than others, I feel like that's important as well. Like I don't think it's fair, this is my opinion, I don't think it's fair that we do one or the other to the extreme. I feel like it's important that, especially if you have a lot of introverted friends, or if you have a lot of people who don't need that emotional consistency, to kind of like communicate with that to the other person. Be like, hey, I'm someone who's like this. I'd appreciate it if we could do this every once in a while in a way that fits both of our schedules. I think that's the only reason why I have such good relationships with my friends, because I've communicated that with them and they've communicated their needs with me, and we're constantly working on it. And sometimes I can be like, oh my god, I want to hang out, and then I have to remember like, oh, this person's busy. You know what? That's okay. Whereas before I would be like, oh my god, they're always busy. This is not fair, blah, blah, blah. And then now I'm more like, it's not that it's not fair. It's just who they are. And that's okay. And I can choose to accept that, or I can choose to walk away. I feel like that's something we forget a lot. Like, you can walk away. That's the option. You can not be as emotionally invested in that person. So I feel like I'm really happy that I realized that that's how... I'm happy that I realized that about myself, that I am so devoted to my friendships. Because before, I just assumed that everyone was like that, and that's literally just not true. So now I'm more protective of like my space and my energy, and when I choose to be a devoted friend or not, and who I choose to be a devoted friend to, because now I'm like, oh, not everyone is like that. Okay, and that's okay. I feel like, again, as I said before, like I was really sad in the beginning, but now I'm like, it's okay. Like, we all are different for a reason. We all have different personalities for a reason. But anyways, that was my spiel about what I've been learning. I feel like when I come on here, I kind of just talk about something that I've been learning and just like talk about my experience with it and how it relates to my life. And I feel like you guys like that. So please feel free to comment what you think about what I said, or just give me an emoji for this algorithm. Help me beat the algorithm. I hope you enjoyed the window view of the rain today. Yeah, thank you. See you next time.